Okay guys, so today I wanted to do a video all about Mustangs and the BLM. Now I'm not going to be able to cover all the information about Mustangs in this video because there is a lot to go over, but I'm going to talk about the main common questions that I get about people who either want to know more about Mustangs, want to adopt a Mustang, or anything like that. I will put a couple of links in the description that are more informational sites about Mustangs, as well as a couple of Facebook pages that are made for the conservation of the breed. The most common question that you will hear is, what is a Mustang? So to know exactly what a Mustang is, you have to go back into their history to really explain what they are. In the 1500s, the Spanish conquistadors came to the Americas to conquer the land. They brought along with them horses from the Iberian Peninsula. While some people think that those were Spanish Mustangs, other people say that there's no way that it could be a Spanish Mustang, and it was probably either Andalusians or Stanos, but there's really no way of telling what horse they actually brought over. But they did bring the horses with them, and that helped them take over the land. When they went to go home, however, they didn't bring the horses with them for two main reasons. One was they had just gotten a bunch of new stuff, and if you've ever gone on vacation, you know that when you go on vacation, you're like, sweet, everything fits in my bag, we're all good to go. Then you're getting ready to leave, and you've got all these new souvenirs, and you're like, where am I going to put this stuff? So they had that same kind of a problem. So they went, well, we don't really need the horses anymore. We've got horses back home, so we'll just let these horses go and let them out. So they did it for space, and also because they've got horses at home. There's no need for them to be bringing them back. So it was just kind of a waste of time to try and get them back onto the boat. So those horses that were let out were generally found by Native Americans, or the people that were indigenous to that area. And they were either used for food, or they went, hey, we can ride these things. This is fantastic. We'll be like the conquistadors, and we'll just ride around and have fun. So the breed stayed pretty wild and pretty feral. So then once we hit the Industrial Revolution, horses sort of started to become obsolete. We didn't really need them anymore. We had these machines that could do what horses did, including cars, trains, different types of farming materials. So horses weren't necessarily needed anymore. So people would just let their horses out and went, all right, bye. Have fun, go frolic, be free. So those horses that were released they then bred with the horses that were already there. Because of this, Mustangs don't really have a lot of breed standards. They are known as what is called a grade breed, which means that you cannot register them. So what I mean by register is the quarter horses have what's known as the AQHA, thoroughbreds have the Jockey Club, paint horses have the APHA, and what an association does is it basically is just a way of saying, hey, this horse was bred by these two horses, who were bred by these two horses, who were then bred by these horses, so on and so forth. So if you have a grade horse, that means that you can't register them because you don't know who they were bred to, or they're just a mutt. Mustangs are what's known as the mutt of the horse world, but they're a purebred mutt. So a lot of the time people don't want grade horses because they're not seen as a good breed of horse, especially if you're showing, though Mustangs are probably the best grade horse you will ever find. And because they're grade horses, we don't know who bred them. We don't know who they bred to. Horses in different ranges will have different features. So Mustangs don't really have any breed standards, apart from a couple of things that are just made to survive. And those couple of things are, they're going to be well muscled, they're going to have good feet, which, why do you want good feet in a horse? Well, that's because if a horse doesn't have good feet, then they can't run away, they can't survive. So a Mustang has to have good feet to survive in the wild. A lot of the time they will also be very colorful, and I'll talk about why Mustangs are colorful in a minute. And they're built to adapt and to survive. If you want to have a horse that can adapt to any environment, like if you move a lot and you want a horse that can adapt to different types of environments, get a Mustang. Because a Mustang can go one day in the snow and then the next day in the desert. They're fine. they will be okay with that. Because they are built to survive, their body is built to adapt to whatever their environment is telling them that they are okay with. But other than that, there aren't really very many breed standards to them. One thing that is sort of a way to tell where a horse is from is their body. In these more southern states like Nevada, Arizona, they had horses that were bigger and stockier because those horses were used for farming. So in those states, you're going to have Mustangs that are a bit taller, a bit beefier, and they'll have a little bit more of the feathering. Whereas in the northern part of the states, you had more pleasure horses like quarter horses and thoroughbreds. So you're going to have lankier, leaner horses. And they're usually going to be a bit shorter too. I've noticed that if you get a horse from Oregon, you're going to have a tinier horse. In the middle, you're going to get a mixture of the two, which is why Bugsy is very short but stocky, and she has those big feathers. We think she's from Colorado, so she's in that median line, so she'll be short but stocky. So depending on the range, you're going to get a different sized horse. So if you are a taller or larger person, you're going to want to go more with the horses that are in the southern ranges. If you're more of a short, tiny person like me, you'll want one of the horses that are in the northern states because they're going to be tiny. They're going to be smaller. Another common question is, what's the difference between a Kiger Mustang and a BLM Mustang or an American Mustang? And really, there are very few differences between the breeds. A Kiger Mustang, though, is seen as more of the pure-lined Mustang, which means that they definitely descend from Spanish Mustangs. They have done DNA testing that proves that, yes, these horses came from Spanish Mustangs. They resemble more Iberian horses, but they're going to be well-muscled, they're going to have good feet, and they usually come in solid colors, dun being the most predominant. It's not entirely sure why these horses are like this. It's just how they are. They usually don't have any paint markings or any Appaloosa markings like regular Mustangs do. But for the most part, they're very similar in body type and temperament. And if you were to put a Mustang and a Kiger Mustang next to each other, they would look almost exactly the same. Same with if you were to put a Spanish Mustang and an American Mustang together, they look pretty similar. So there's not very many. They're just seen as more of a purebred horse. In the only way that a purebred wild horse could be. Another common question is, why are Mustangs so colorful, and why do they never follow color rules? And that's because if you think about it, you've got horses that they don't care. They're going to breed with, a stallion's going to breed with whatever mare he can get his hands on. So his color genes are already kind of mixed up, and then he's going to mate with another horse that has mixed up genes. So you're going to get all these different color genes that are going to combine together, which is why you'll see horses that are, oh, well, they've got the dun gene, but then they've also got the chrome gene, but then they've got this gene over here, and then they've got the bay gene, which I can't think of the name for the actual word for the bay gene, which I can never say it properly anyhow. But they're just, you don't know what color your horse actually is if it's a Mustang. Bugsy, in the summertime, she's black. Like, you can't tell that she's bay. But in the wintertime, she looks like a bay horse. So she's probably what's known as a wild bay or a black bay. If you look at her right now, you can see that on the top here, even though she's really dusty and dirty, I haven't groomed her yet, she's really blackening. She's also really black right here. But then she's got these like brown spots. That's her winter bay coming out. So again, with Mustang, there's a reason why they're colorful. It's just simply because they don't even know what they're doing with their colors. So another common question is, what is the BLM and what do they do? So the BLM stands for the Bureau of Land Management, which just is a fancy term for they take care of the ranges and make sure that people don't build where they're not supposed to, and they don't disturb the turtles and the wildlife and whatnot. So if you want to build on BLM land or be on BLM land, you have to have special permits for that and signed documents from the BLM saying, you're good to go, you can be here, you're fine. The reason why the BLM is focused on Mustangs is because in the 1970s there was an act that was the Wild and Free Roaming Horse and Bureau Act, which was instigated by a lady who is nicknamed Mustang Annie. And Mustang Annie, at first, she was like, I don't care, let them do what they want to do. They'd heard that horses were being rounded up by planes, and at the time, if you saw a wild Mustang on your land, you could just shoot them, and no one would care. They saw the horses as a pest that ate the land, or ate the grass that was for cattle. But Mustang Annie she was driving to work, and a horse trailer got in front of her, and she noticed that there was just a stream of blood coming off of the trailer. So, being a good person, she decided that she was going to follow the trailer, and it went to a refining place, which basically is just a fancy word for a horse slaughter plant. And she saw horses that were jammed into this tiny trailer, it wasn't a tiny trailer, it was just too many horses in one trailer. And there was a baby horse on the ground being trampled by the other horses because it had fallen down, and they were packed in there so tightly that none of them could do anything about it, and all of them were bloody. One of them had both its eyes just messed up. One of them had an eye, had a leg that was broken. These horses were they didn't care because they were wild horses and no one wanted them. So she went to the government court and pleaded for these horses and got the act made that said, we can no longer round these horses up by planes, you can't shoot them anymore, they are a protected species. Because they almost went extinct. We almost had no more Mustangs. And she was not going to let that happen. Which is why the BLM is now a thing. And why they round up. So, the BLM is the only organization, it is a government-run organization that is allowed to round up horses. And in the BLM, there are different factions that are used for each range. So there will be a faction for range whatever number, and then there will be a faction for whatever number. There are also 2 different factions for the Kiger Mustangs as well, because they are a different species. They are a different breed of horse. So, not a species, my bad. So they get their own roundups. So the next common question that I get very often is, how does the BLM round up horses? How do they get them from the wild into people's homes? And it's kind of a brutal way of doing it. It's not the best way. What they do is they set up temporary pens in their area where they spotted horses before. And it's a temporary pen that they put up with panels, and then they put this orange mesh fencing that's like that weird plastic material that acts as a funnel, and it makes a V into the pen so that because the horses are running as giant herds, they don't run in straight lines, so they need to make it so that the opening is much bigger than the opening into the pen itself. So what they do is they go by helicopter, and they go and they find the herds, and they herd them towards the pen. But the problem with that is the helicopter people don't know how rough the terrain is on the ground, so a lot of horses end up getting hurt during this process, and they get separated from their families, foals get left behind, all kinds of bad things happen. Some horses even die during this process. And once they get closer to the pen, there are usually guys on horseback who help herd the horses into the traps. They sometimes will also use what's known as a decoy horse, and this horse is a horse that's trained to run straight into the trap. That's all they do. And they just have the horse haltered, and they take the halter off and let the horse go, and the horse runs into the herd and then runs straight into the trap. And it's just to lead them in to make sure that they actually go in there. And then once they're in the trap, they close them up. And usually from there, they go to one of 2 places. They'll either go straight to an auction facility where they're auctioned off to adopters, not like a regular horse auction where there's slaughter people for the most part, or they will go to a holding facility and they will wait until a designated time period. When they get rounded up, though, they will separate the horses into 3 different categories. stallions, mares, and babies. That way the horses can't breed with each other anymore, and that way stallions can't fight over mares, because that will just make big problems because the horses are in a confined area and there's really nowhere for them to go. So they have to be very careful that they don't have horses starting fights. So that's why they split them into the different groups. They do not take babies away from moms if they are clearly not ready. Those horses go into a nursing pen until the baby is old enough, and then that baby goes into the weanlings and youngsters pen, and the mom will go back with the other mares. Generally, though, when they go into the holding facilities, they have what's known as a duration period where the horses are not allowed to be sold. And the horses are just kept in the pens. They're taken care of for a little while. Some holding facilities even will start to gentle the horses for you, though usually those horses will go for a little bit more money, simply because they have some prior training. When they do get into the facilities, though, they're vaccinated and they're wormed, and sometimes they even will put them into this chute thing that turns them on their side, and they can grind their feet down so that their feet are trimmed, and then let them back into the holding pens. Not every place will trim a horse's feet for you, but some places do. Regulations state that they must worm and vaccinate the horses. They cannot give you a horse that is not wormed or vaccinated. If they do, then the facility will either get a fine or it will be shut down because it is not following the guidelines that are given by the government. Another common question is, how do you get a Mustang? What are there regulations? Can I just adopt one? And there are some regulations both for you as well as your facility. So I'll start off with what humans have to do before they can adopt. You have to be 18 years of age or older. If you're 16, you're not going to be able to buy the Mustang yourself. You're going to have your parents bid on the horse for you, and it will technically be their horse. You cannot have any strikes against you as an adopter, so if you broke a rule and got a horse taken away from you, you are not allowed to adopt again because they don't think that you are qualified to have a Mustang. Obviously, you messed up before, so now you're not allowed to do it anymore. And then with the facilities, every pen for a horse over the age of 2 has to have 6-foot fencing. And this can either be metal paneling or very heavy wood fencing. I personally don't really like the wood fencing because I've seen horses break through wood fencing before, and it just makes me nervous. Especially with a horse that's, if you push its buttons too hard, it will break through whatever, and it can really hurt the horse. Things like no-climb fence are also okay as long as it's enforced against a panel or a heavy wooden fence. You don't want any barbed wire, hot wire, or T-fencing. Those are not allowed. You cannot have that. If you have a horse that is under the age of 2, or is gentled, or you have a burro, you are allowed to have 5-foot fencing as the minimum. You also have to have I think it's 400 square foot enclosure for the horse. I think that's what it is, unless they changed it, but I'm pretty sure that that's accurate. There's no maximum size, though for the most part they suggest that you have a pen that is close to the recommended, just because it is harder to get a horse to focus if it's out in a bigger enclosure. So you obviously wouldn't want to put a wild Mustang that you're trying to gentle into a big pasture that's like 300 acres. That's not the best idea because you'll probably never find it again, or it'll never come to you and you'll never be able to do anything with it. So they do suggest that you keep the horse close to the recommended size, or close to the pen into a recommended size. You also are required to have some form of shading, and I can't remember what the size is for the shading. I will, again, put all of these in the description, the link to where it says the requirements for having one. So another thing that people ask a lot is, how do I adopt a horse? How do I get a Mustang? Well, first you have to apply with the BLM, and I will have the BLM's website linked below. You have to apply online with them or in person at one of the one of the holding facilities. So once you fill out the application, you will then be put into the next bidding time period. As I'm filming this video, the bidding time period has ended, but every like month or so, they have a new bidding time where you can bid on different horses, and they will show you which horses are available in that bidding. You can also go to your holding facility and see if any horses are still available that haven't had any bids on them. I think the last bidding ended with 10 horses that had no bids on them whatsoever, so they will be cycled into the next available bidding time period. And these horses don't go for very much. The base deposit is $125, and a lot of the time if a horse doesn't get bid on, that's all you're going to pay for it. I think this last time period, the horse that went for the most money was $500, which is not that much for horses, but you have to remember that when you buy a Mustang, these horses are inexpensive simply because they are wild horses and have little to no prior handling. So you're paying for what you're getting. You're getting a fresh, off-the-range horse that is about as wild as you can get a horse to be. But so you have to take that into consideration. They also recommend that you have a trainer if you do not know how to train horses yourself. And some areas even tell you that you, as a owner, are not allowed to train the horse. You have to send it to a professional. Now, if you're a professional, there's a gray area because I guess you could send it to yourself. But they usually recommend that you send it to someone who knows what they're doing. Especially for something like saddling a horse, gentling them and getting them to where they can do this and just have a halter on. Pretty easy, it's not that difficult. But the saddling part is where they really recommend that you send them to somebody else, just because you can really mess up a horse if you don't know how to train a horse under saddle properly. Another common question is, what does the brand mean? If you don't know, Mustangs have a brand. They have a freeze brand on their neck. The reason why they do freeze branding is because it's less severe than hot branding, because horses have skin that is actually more thin than ours is by several centimeters or millimeters. I can't remember the actual ratio, which is why if a fly lands on a horse, they feel it. So I can barely even be touching Bugsy, and she'll feel that. So if you were to do hot branding, where you burn the horse's skin and scar it, that's really painful for them. Just like if you were to hot brand yourself, it's really going to hurt. The reason why it doesn't hurt cows that much is because they have much thicker skin, which is why we make different pieces of tack with their hide, because it's very thick and durable. So what the freeze branding does is it kills the follicle that takes care of the coloring. So with a horse that's black, they're going to have black pigmenting into that skin. If you can see, there's this little white dot right here on Bugsy. This is right there. That, I guess she nicked herself, she banged herself, I don't know how she did it. There was never a wound there, it just, her hair started to fall out, and hey, lo and behold, brand new white patch. Don't know where it came from, don't know when it happened, who knows. But that's basically what happened here was the color pigmenting follicle, because horses have two follicles, the one where the hair comes out and the one where the color comes out, and that follicle died in this area. So when you freeze brand a horse, it does that and it kills it. Now, you have to freeze brand for longer periods of time depending on the horse's color. So with a darker horse, put it on there, wait a couple of seconds, and then boom, you're done. With a horse that's a white horse, you have to hold it there longer because their pigmenting color is different than a dark colored horse. So what it'll do, it'll actually turn it black. The hair will, instead of growing out white, will turn black. If you were to freeze brand a cow though, because their hair works in a different way, you're going to get a white brand that you'll never see. But with horses, you do have to hold it there longer. So if you have a lighter colored horse, you got to sit there for more time. But so the freeze brand, and I'm going to put up a picture as I'm talking, that is Bugsy's freeze brand, because right now you can't see it. Her winter coat is still falling out, so you can't really see anything except a bunch of white lines, simply because all this long fluffy hair that you see is sitting over top of it. But so I'll put up the picture that I have of her summer, in the summer when we first got her, where her freeze brand is very, very clear. So the first symbol is the BLM's signature, pretty much. It looks sort of like a U slapped next to a C, At least in my eyes, it kind of does, and then the U has a little tail on the wrong side. That's just basically the U.S. symbol for the BLM. The next two symbols are the horse's estimated birth year. So the top number will be, so it'll go from the top to the bottom. So if you have a horse that was born in 91, it'll be a 9 above a 1. So that's what that means. And this is all just, it was an estimation. Vets, if they're very experienced, can guess how old a horse is by looking at their teeth. However, that's not an exact science, and there's no true way of telling how old a horse is simply by looking at them or their teeth. There's really no way of telling how old they are anyhow. So with Mustangs, it's all a guess. Bugsy's approximately 21 years old. She could be slightly younger than that. She could be older than that. It just kind of depends. It's just kind of a guess as to how old she actually is. So then the next string of numbers is 6 different numbers, and that is the range that the horse was born in. So depending on, like I said, different horses from different ranges look different. So the reason why they have the range number is that way they can identify that horse and where they came from. And if you get a brand reader, or your horse's brand is clear enough to where you can see it, you can even look it up online and see what the numbers stand for and where that range is, which I did with Bugsy using this exact picture. So that's what the brand means. And along with the brand, they will also get what's known as a number tag, which I have no idea what Bugsy's number tag is. Don't even know. It's on her BLM papers, but we didn't get those when we got the bill of sale. On the BLM papers, they have the range, they have the horse's brand, they have the number, the tag number, and then they have some other information about, you know, the horse itself, sex, height, were they in foal, or were they born in the facility because the mom was rounded up still pregnant, or were they rounded up themselves. Bugsy is known as a wild-born horse, which means that she was rounded up from a range. She was about 4 years old when she was rounded up, and then she went through a year duration period before she was adopted, so she was 5 when she was adopted, and then we got her when she was like, I want to say she was 7 or 8 when we got her. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to do math for that, and I'm trying to be quick about this. But so that tag number is, they take this little, it looks almost like a circular dog tag, but much larger, and it has a string of 4 numbers, and they wrap it with some form of a twine around the throat latch of the horse. And if you've ever seen a Mustang that was in a holding facility, you'll see those little things dangling from their necks. That's just the registration number. So if you bid on number 7063, they will look for horse, okay, which one has that string of numbers? Okay, it's that one, we'll take you. Because they can't go, oh, it's that little, the bay one over there. No, they can't do that because any horse could be a bay. You know, horses, if you have someone who doesn't know exactly which horse you're talking about, they need to have some way of identifying, and that's their identification number. And they can't really go, oh, it's the one with brand blah, 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 because different horses could have the same brand. So that's why they have that little tag. Some people like to save the tags. I don't think that the guy that adopted her did, because I didn't seem like that kind of a guy. But a lot of people who buy horses, buy Mustangs for themselves and aren't buying them to gentle them and then sell them, they will often save the tag. I know that if I ever adopt another Mustang and train it up, I will be saving that tag. Excuse Presley, she's being rude. But I would save that tag. So if you guys have any more questions, like I said, leave those in the comment section. I know that I wasn't able to cover everything in this video, but I did cover the majority of the questions that I usually get. And now I'm going to go groom Bugsy because she's filthy and dirty. And we're going to end it there.